Have you ever wondered why one thought can quietly follow you for hours or even days? Thousands of thoughts pass through your mind every single day. Most arrive and leave without asking to stay. But every now and then, one thought lingers. It waits while you're driving. It returns while you're working. It whispers just before you fall asleep. Is it really more important than all the others? Or did it simply become important because your attention kept finding its way back? Today, we're going to slow that invisible process down and watch it unfold, one step at a time, because once you can see how a thought stays, you begin to understand how it can finally let go. Every day, your mind produces thousands of thoughts. Some are useful, some are random, some last only a second. You probably won't remember most of what you thought this morning. Those thoughts arrived, did their job, and quietly faded away. But every once in a while, one thought behaves differently. Perhaps it was something you said, a decision you made, an awkward conversation, a medical report, or simply a question that begins with, "What if?" The strange part is this: the thought itself hasn't changed, yet it keeps returning again and again. Why? There's an old observation in psychology that offers our first clue. Imagine a waiter serving 6 different tables. He remembers every unpaid order, who asked for tea, who ordered soup, who is still waiting for dessert. But the moment the bill is paid, those details disappear surprisingly quickly. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. The mind has a habit of holding on to what feels unfinished, not because it's the most important, but because it feels incomplete, like an internet browser with one tab still open. Until it feels complete, the mind keeps checking whether there's anything left to do. That is where our story begins. Chapter 2: The Road You Keep Paving. Now, imagine something different. Imagine that every thought becomes a small paper airplane. Most of them glide quietly across the landscape and disappear beyond the horizon. But one airplane doesn't leave. It circles, not because it's bigger, not because it's louder, not because it's more dangerous. Something almost invisible has started happening. Your attention keeps returning to it. Once, twice, again and again. Now here's something remarkable. Neuroscience has a simple principle. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Think of walking across a grassy field. The first time, nothing changes. Walk the same path tomorrow, and again next week, and eventually, a narrow trail begins to appear. Nobody built that path. It formed because it was used. Thoughts work in much the same way. Every time your attention travels back to the same thought, that mental pathway becomes just a little easier to follow. Not all at once, just a little, then a little more, until one day, returning there feels almost automatic. The thought isn't pulling you back. Without realizing it, you're slowly paving the road that leads back to it. Transition. So if unfinished thoughts invite our attention, and repeated attention strengthens the pathway, what happens next? Why does that pathway begin to feel so important? That's where psychology adds the next piece of the puzzle. Chapter 3: When Attention Creates Importance. Think about your name. Imagine you're in a crowded room, hundreds of conversations, all happening at once. Most of them fade into the background, but the moment someone says your name, your attention turns instantly. What changed? Not the sound, not the room, only one thing. Your brain decided, this matters. Attention works like a spotlight. Whatever it shines on appears brighter, clearer, more important. And here's something fascinating. The spotlight doesn't just reveal importance. Sometimes it creates it. Each time your attention returns, the thought feels a little more familiar. Psychologists call this the familiarity effect. We naturally trust, notice, and remember what we've encountered repeatedly. Another process quietly joins in. It's called attentional bias. Once the brain begins treating something as personally relevant, it starts looking for it more often, almost like adjusting a radio until one station becomes louder than all the others. Nothing about the thought has changed. Only the amount of attention it receives, and slowly that changes your relationship with it. Chapter 4: What Neuroscience Really Shows. Let's look beneath the experience. Inside the brain, there's a network that's especially active when your attention turns inward, when you're remembering, reflecting, imagining, replaying yesterday's conversation, or wondering what tomorrow might bring. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network. There's nothing abnormal about it. In fact, it's one of the reasons we're able to learn from experience, plan for the future, and understand ourselves. Now imagine you're sitting quietly, your mind drifts, then someone calls your name. Almost instantly, your attention shifts outward. That change doesn't happen by accident. Another network helps decide what deserves attention right now. Think of it as the brain switchboard. Scientists call it the salience network. Most of the time, these systems work beautifully together. One reflects, the other redirects. Reflection, then action. Looking inward, then returning to the world. But during rumination, that switch can become a little sticky. The inward conversation continues long after it has stopped being useful. Not because your brain is broken, not because you're weak, but because it still believes the question hasn't been answered. And if the question feels unfinished, the search continues. Chapter 5: When Thinking Becomes a Loop. From the inside, this doesn't feel like overthinking. It feels responsible. If I think about it just one more time, maybe I'll finally understand. So you revisit the memory. You analyze the conversation. You replay the decision. For a moment, it feels productive, but then the same question returns. Nothing has changed, except the path has become easier to travel. Around and around, the mind goes. Psychologists call this rumination. Not because thinking is unhealthy. Thinking helps us solve problems. Rumination is different. Problem solving moves forward. Rumination moves in circles. One creates new understanding. The other keeps visiting the same place, hoping the scenery will change. And with every circuit, the path becomes just a little smoother. Transition. If that's how the loop begins, can we interrupt it without fighting the thought? The answer may surprise you. Chapter 6: Where we see this. At this point, you might be wondering, does this happen only in mental illness? Not at all. This is a very human process. It happens the night before an important interview, after sending a message that hasn't been answered, after a difficult conversation, waiting for medical test results, wondering whether you made the right decision. Our minds naturally return to what feels unfinished. Most of the time, the process settles on its own. But sometimes, the loop grows stronger. In anxiety, the question often becomes, what if something bad happens? In depression, the mind keeps returning to what went wrong. In obsessive-compulsive disorder, the question may become, what if I missed something important? Emotions, but underneath them, the mind is using the same psychological machinery, trying again and again to finish something that never quite feels finished. Chapter 7: A Different Way to Look. Now comes the most important idea in this entire video. The thought isn't keeping itself alive. Your relationship with it is. Every return quietly teaches the brain, this deserves attention. Attention becomes repetition. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity increases importance. Importance creates urgency. And urgency makes the thought return once again. Do you see the loop? Nothing about the thought needed to change. The process itself created the experience. That's why a thought appearing many times doesn't make it true. Feeling urgent doesn't make it dangerous. Feeling real doesn't make it accurate. Thoughts are events in the mind, not evidence, not predictions, not instructions. Sometimes they're simply thoughts. Visual psychiatry practice, 1 minute. Before we begin, there's something important to know. Most people try to get rid of the thought. Let's try something. For the next few seconds, don't think about a white bear. What happened? For most people, the image appears almost immediately. Trying to force a thought away often gives it even more attention. It's like pushing a beach ball underwater. You can hold it there for a while, but the moment you stop pushing, it pops back up. So today, we're not going to push. We're simply going to watch. Take a blank sheet of paper, draw a small circle, right in the center. Inside the circle, write the thought using only a few words. Now, set a timer for 1 minute. As other thoughts appear, write them around the circle. Don't analyze them, don't judge them, don't organize them, just notice. By the end of the minute, something interesting usually happens. The original thought is still there, but it is no longer the only thing occupying your mind. The exercise isn't meant to erase the thought. It's meant to remind you that attention can move. And if attention can move, the loop can begin to loosen. When should you seek professional help? Recurring thoughts are part of being human, but if they begin to dominate your day, interfere with your work, your studies, your relationships, or your sleep, it's worth talking to a qualified mental health professional. The same is true if you find yourself checking repeatedly, seeking reassurance, avoiding situations, or spending hours trying to find certainty. You don't have to wait until things become overwhelming. Effective treatments exist, and asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a step toward understanding what your mind has been trying to do all along. Visual Psychiatry Insight. Let's return to the question we began with. Why do some thoughts stay? Not because they're always true, not because they're always dangerous, and not because your mind is working against you. Sometimes a thought stays because it feels unfinished. Attention keeps returning. The path becomes smoother, and the mind mistakes familiarity for importance. Understanding that process doesn't make every difficult thought disappear, but it changes the way you relate to it. And sometimes, changing that relationship is where healing begins.